Hello, welcome to What School Leaders Should Know. This is a series of presentations designed to stimulate discussion, support leaders in their roles in schools, and enable them to identify their training needs. We all know, don't we, that leadership in any area can be the most rewarding, but it can also be problematic. This slide with its heading isn't designed to say, if you know all that is in this presentation, you will be a good leader. More, good leadership relies on reflection, self-awareness, and awareness and empathy with others with whom we work. One of the most difficult things to get right as a leader is setting a vision. And very often a vision is reduced to a set of words known as the vision statement, which mean different things to different people. It is important as a leader to know what direction we want things to go in, and as a school leader, what direction and what standard of learning we want to see in the school. A clear vision which is understood by every group of people in the school community, including governors, including parents, including staff, including students, including everybody that comes to the school. If it's understood by everybody, the direction is clear. Everybody will know what their role is in order to fulfill that vision. So what does a good vision look like? Again, this can be discussed. This can be discussed in your groups, what it looks like. But for me, over many years, I've tried in school to really focus the vision on students' outcomes. What is it I want the students to be able to achieve? What skills do I want them to develop? What experiences do I want them to have as a result of being in the school of which I am a leader? And that, by being clear on that, then we are able to measure whether that vision is implementable. One of the most impressive visions for me is probably one of the simplest, and we're all familiar with Martin Luther King, but in his speech, I Have a Dream, his vision was very, very clear. He wanted children to be judged by the content of their character, not the colour of their skin. And then he proceeded to detail what would need to happen in the judiciary, in the law and order sector, in the educational sector, for that to happen. And in the same way, if we know what we want for our students in the school, we'll know how to set the systems and processes which enable that to happen. And when we've got the systems and processes, we'll be able to hold each other and ourselves to account for ensuring that students achieve what it is we set out for them to achieve. And more importantly, they will know, they will be clear, they will know how to fulfill the school's visions for themselves. So as part of becoming a leader, or even if you're an experienced leader, is your vision clear? And is it clear to everybody else? And have you taken into account everybody else's point of view? The next step in looking at the vision, where we will find the vision implemented most, is obviously in the classroom. So having a clear view of where we want students to be will enable us to come up with some common definitions. And the first common definition that we want is what good learning looks like in the classroom, because that's the main means by which our vision will be implemented. And as leaders, we need to know, and teachers need to know with us, how we are going to implement that in every lesson and in every aspect of our teaching and in every aspect of our provision. And I think one of the hardest things is connecting the vision to what goes on in the classroom. But setting objectives is also part of the vision. It's actually framing within that lesson what it is we want students to know, do, and understand as a result of that lesson. So as leaders, we need to know how to frame a learning objective and where that learning objective comes from. Of course, it comes from the curriculum. The curriculum is what we are teaching. It identifies what skills we want our students to learn. But most importantly, very often missed out, and this is where the vision and the objectives sort of go astray, is because it's not practical. Students learn stuff, they learn knowledge, they know facts, they do stuff, but they don't often connect it in order to be able to apply their knowledge and skills. And I often give learning to drive as probably the best example of teaching and testing. I myself have only ever done one driving test 43 years ago. But before and after and since, I am constantly assessing myself, and others who drive with me are assessing my ability to control the car, to get the car from A to B. Learners need to know how to manage their learning. They need to know how to get from A to B. And to get from A to B, we have to define the starting point and the finishing point. And learning objectives in any given time do that for us if they're well framed. But if the learning objectives are not well framed, they're low level challenge, we will only get part way to our destination. If we only identify the stopping points on the journey and not the end point, then this will result in a low level of challenge for students. So really being clear how to set starting points in learning, taking into account students' prior knowledge and taking into account what the curriculum standards are. Remember, in the UAE, the inspection framework gives us a common language, and the common language for good teaching and learning is not in the teaching section. It's in the performance standard one when it talks about all students, or the majority, at any given time, making progress that is beyond the curriculum, national and international standards. So where do we start? We start with a vision. We set up the systems and processes which will enable that vision to be achieved, and then we really concentrate on implementing that vision in the classroom. And where do we start in the classroom? Identifying what it is we're going to learn, from what point we're going to learn, how we're going to learn it, and recognizing where we end up when we have completed that lesson or that particular assignment in the curriculum. To know the curriculum isn't just a question of knowing what's on the textbook. In fact, that's the very opposite of knowing the curriculum. The textbook will never, ever help students get to the point of our vision. It will never be aspirational. It will never enable the majority of students to achieve standards beyond the curriculum, national and international standards. It will never enable them to do that by just working through a textbook. So each teacher has to have the subject knowledge. So that means the leaders need to be able to challenge and support all teachers and middle leaders having the subject knowledge that they need. And what does that mean? It means that all teachers should know the big idea of the curriculum, whether it be the US or the UK, and of the MOE curriculum, how it all fits together. What's the big idea? How does it fit our vision in terms of what we want students to know, do, and understand, and in terms of what they will look like as a result of their learning following that curriculum? We really do need to know what the national, international, and curriculum standards are, because if we don't, we won't recognise when they're not being done, and we won't recognise when they are being achieved. And if we don't recognise them, we could inadvertently be holding students and teachers back. So we need to know the big picture, and within that, what are the course standards for each and every grade, and how is it students can go beyond them if they're to achieve. Just as we talk about the vision being a set of words which everybody understands, what happens in a lesson is the same. Learning has to be a common language across the school, across the department. Do we have a common language for starting a lesson? Is it a learning intention or a learning objective? Just a small illustration. But you can see how easily students might get confused if they're getting a different language from one class to the next. And the wider point, language development should be the responsibility of every teacher. So therefore, leaders have to ensure that that language development is not just in early years or in the elementary primary section in English, it's in every subject. Because language development is more than just words. It's the means by which we all communicate. And for students, it's the means by which they can communicate and make sense of their learning. So language development is something essential to the leader's portfolio. It should be evident throughout the school that the leaders have a handle on how they are going to ensure all groups of students progress with their language and have the language that they need. And I'm not just talking about vocabulary, I'm talking about the meaning behind words and the meaning behind expression and the opportunities to communicate in different ways. The leader has to know how that will be incorporated. And when it's looking for whether the vision is implemented, it should be visible and tangible across the school. Now, here's the big challenge for all of us, is when we're talking about getting the language of achievement and implementing the vision, is without getting bogged down in the minutiae, we need to know how to measure. If we don't know what the starting point and interim stopping points are at any given moment in time, then we will not be able to help the students make the progress they need. And there does need to be a common definition of progress. I've heard many definitions. It's quite clear in the UAE inspection framework, but I think it is helpful if all leaders could have a clear view on what good progress means at any given point. What does it mean in lessons? What does it mean across a year? What does it mean across a phase? And what does it mean across? And to help with that measurement of progress, there are different ways of measuring the progress, of course, but they has to be tangible. To help is the formal assessment. All leaders should know what those formal assessments tell us about the child. And more importantly, they should know how to get the teachers to communicate where to the students, so the students know where they are in the learning, they can make sense of the assessment, whether it be CAT, IBT in Arabic, math, GL, whatever form of formal assessment is being used. It is important that leaders know what the outcomes of that tells us. And therefore, the leaders should be able to understand how to analyze all types of data. Now, we're not all mathematicians, and not all of us have a statistical bent, even those who are mathematicians. And sometimes we get daunted by analysis. Don't. Numbers are just a means by which we can identify where children are. It is not the number itself that's important. It's our interpretation and what we do with that which enables students to make progress. It really is important that leaders are able to discuss and set up in formal and informal settings opportunities to analyse and assess the outcomes of students. It is equally important that they do the same for the students themselves so that they can become independent learners. You become an independent learner and you can do things for yourself. Going back to the driving test analogy, as soon as you pass that test and there's an assurance you can do something, you go onto the open road. Not without the need for assessment, not without the need to take care, not without the need to tell somebody where you're going and when you expect to arrive, not without that. So it's not a free-for-all and let people go, but students need to know where they're headed in order that they can become independent learners. And I would suggest that becoming an independent learner is part of what schools should be about. We have our own children and we hope that they can be independent adults and make all the decisions that they need to make to have a fulfilling life. It is the same in learning within any given subject. Students, the aim should always be at whatever age to become as independent as they can in their own thought and in managing their own learning process. And here's the challenge. There are many, aren't there? And we've already alluded to some. But one of the words that's used very often about schools now, and it's used in the vision, and it actually says in the inspection framework about all schools should be inclusive schools and the vision should be inclusive. I often wonder whether we've really got a handle on what that means to be a fully inclusive school. Because when children come in or families come into our schools that present in a different way than we are used to, we tend to find that challenging. And sometimes in some schools, it can happen that the challenge is too much and we end up saying we can't meet the needs of the learner. Now, that's the very opposite of being an inclusive school. Remember, learning and schools are about children, so therefore it is our responsibility to identify how they can learn, not theirs, not when they're young children. And we all know the stories of people getting through the school systems, and it's not till they're adults they're identified with specific learning difficulties, which are sort of manifested as dyslexia or autism or any other kind of label. What we have to be careful of is not just going with the label, but really identifying the learner's needs. And to identify the learner's needs, we also need to know their strengths. It is our responsibility to know how students want to express their learning. Not every student can express their learning by working through a textbook or writing sentences. Many will need to express that learning in different ways. What's important for leaders is to keep an eye on the prize. Is the aim to get all students writing neatly, or is it the aim to get all students expressing their thoughts and their imagination. And if we shift what the real end game is, and we want independent, imaginative, creative learners, we can open up the gateways for all our teachers. We will open up the pathways for students to use their imagination and become independent learners. So it is not the responsibility of one person to write an IEP. Of course, the inclusion department can coordinate that, but it is absolutely essential that all leaders know how to involve all the relevant people. That includes teachers, that includes learning assistants in developing individual educational plans, which set the pathway through for all students. Individual education plans aren't there to stop students learning and identify what they're not at. It's there to identify how they can learn and become good at things and remove the barriers. And as leaders, have a real responsibility for ensuring there is a consistency of understanding and in the use of language across the school, which enables every group of students in every lesson to make progress. Inclusion should not be intervention led. And what I mean by that is it should not be led by taking the student out of the classroom. It should be led by what the student can do in the classroom. That doesn't mean there won't be a need to have special support within or without the lesson. It's about really focusing in on what the student is doing the majority of time, not just in those small amount of time dedicated to inclusion lessons. So I would say is that leaders should know how to ensure that their inclusion department are not just IEP writers or intervention deliverers. They are differentiation champions. They understand differentiation. They understand how to keep the eye on the prize, keep the eye on the vision, keep the eye on the objective, and ensure that every group of students meets that objective, but recognizing they may reach it in slightly different ways. Linked to inclusion, but linked to all aspects of provision, of course, is safeguarding. For me, schools exist for two reasons. And one is obvious, and we speak about it all the time. And that's for learning, absolutely for learning. But the second reason is to keep children safe, to keep children free from harm in all its forms. And more than that, and safe is more than that, it's emotional safety, it's creating its cultural safety, its physical safety. Leaders need to know both the regulation related to safeguarding, but they need to know which structures are in place at any given moment to ensure that their children in the school are as safe as they can be. And it was helpful for me coming up in the UK system. They used to describe the principal's role in particular as in locus parentis, which is a Latin term that means in absence of the parent. So in keeping children safe, we should all be acting as we would want the best parents to react. We would want to react with our own children. But we also have to know what the processes is. And sometimes following the processes can bring us into variance with the very people that we're trying to support. We should know how to do that. We should know those processes, but not enforce them in such a way that they're oppressive and actually deviate from the end game, which is keeping students and staff safe in all its forms. And when I talk about all its forms, really do mean well-being. Well-being very often gets sort of sidelined or pushed into a category where it's about the extras. Yes, the extras are helpful where we have downtime, where our terms and conditions are absolutely important. But well-being is about who we are as people and how we treat and respect and communicate with both the adults with whom we work, but also the children whom we are there to serve and help learning. And well-being should be considered across the school, and leaders should facilitate that understanding of well-being. Well-being has many things. It's not just about the physical time when we take time for ourselves. Well-being is about who we are and who we enable others to become. It's about listening, and it's about empathy, and it's about emotional intelligence. And we should have a view of that as leaders of how we are going to have an emotionally intelligent school community in which all children are safe and all people are well within it. Community. Of course, those of us who have been in school systems a long time will know that we're not just part of an isolated group where the doors close at the start of the day, or in this online period where the Zoom link is sent and it's open, and that's just a didactic relationship between the teacher and the student. We all exist as part of a wider community, and we all have responsibilities within that. And in our schools, we're part of the Athena community. And poet famously said, no man is an island, no person is an island. We exist as a community of schools to actually ensure by working together that we get the best for each and every group of students in every school. And we all know the African proverb, it takes a village to raise a child. Athena is becoming a small town, a community that is based on clear values, that wants the best for those who work for them, but ultimately wants the best for the children within the school so that they have choices. And so everything that's set is with that in mind. So even when we're setting the vision is a part of a community. We can't use learning in isolation. It doesn't work. We learn facts in isolation. We forget them 2 minutes later. All learning has to be applied in context. And if schools exist in isolation and follow their own set of rules, they will quickly perish. It is part of knowing how we work together as a community. So all leaders should know the Athena vision and how that connects with their vision and how that can actually support and bring about accountability for the achievement of that vision. They should also know what that looks like in marketing and all the other aspects of making sure that the school is known. I said earlier about the importance of language. Nowhere is it more important than in setting the school as a business. The language tells the school community what kind of school you are, what kind of people you are, what kind of care support, what kind of challenge, what kind of accountability goes on. And if that vision and that language is not consistently used, when we're marketing the schools, people will get a different impression of what the learning is like and what the outcomes will be for their students. So marketing and managing the resources. And I often say about managing resources, we often ask for more resources before we've identified what we're doing with what we've got. Resources are not the most important aspect of learning. They are important, please. Textbooks are not the most important aspect of learning. They may be useful in providing us and keeping us on track with the general direction. The most important aspect of learning is relationships, building those relationships so that students feel secure to think critically, to learn independently, to be creative and to be innovative. And if we want the students to do that, then we have to be creative and innovative in the way that we manage the business. We have to model that. The way we market the business, the way we talk about our schools, the way we talk about our learning. It is all part of managing the school as a business. So leaders should know, all leaders, without exception, that side of things, how you work within a budget, how you manage resources effectively, because that, in a sense, is the most important life lesson for students to learn when they become independent and making choices themselves. If they can't work within their own budget, if they can't manage their own resources, if they can't manage their own time, if they can't market and express what it is that they're about, then they're going to have difficulties. So seeing the school as a business, as a social entity by which we all come together to achieve what we want to achieve, is actually empowers people. It actually ensures that there is a connection between the different parts of the school provision. Far too often, schools, classrooms are over on one side, the administration is over on the other side. I am reminded, as I've shared with all our schools, of what a cleaner said to John F. Kennedy at NASA, reportedly. When the cleaner was asked what he did at NASA, he said, "We put men on the moon." And it was men on the moon at that point. That's what he said. He didn't say, "I go and clean different facilities." He just said, "Put men on the moon." That's what we're looking for in our vision, that whatever part of the school provision, whether it be the administration side or the school side, we understand all aspects, that schools do not happen in isolation. Resources do not appear in isolation. In order for us to get effective resources and use resources in a way that brings us the best learning, we have to have an understanding of how those different aspects work. I think this is a final slide, and we put in here, and there are many, many things that leaders should know. You will know that, and we haven't attempted to cover that. What I would say to you is schools are nothing in relation to what I said in the previous slide if they're not at the heart of the community. And certainly my experience across education, particularly in the UK, but coming here, is that education is a sector like no other. When decisions are made in certain schools, the whole community wants to know, because it's children at the heart of that. And so leaders should know how to involve the wider community into the vision of the school. And how did they do that? By ensuring that all students are aware of the wider community through the curriculum, through their activities, through volunteering, through work experience, through inventing, through entering competitions, through by being part and parcel of the community and responsive to the needs of that local, national and international community. Not just a question of fundraising when there's a problem, but actually recognizing that what the school can contribute in the wider sense, whether it's through the use of facilities, whether it's through the use of expertise, whether it's students working with each other across schools. I don't know. But leaders need to know how to set schools at the heart of their community. And they must be able to define the community for the students. Very often you go into schools, particularly in the UAE, and you will see many, many nationalities. But actually, you wouldn't know that from the visual environment in which you see or from talking to the students. You would only know that. The particular expertise and the particular enlivenment that different cultures can bring is not evident. So bringing all the cultures together to actually put all groups of students, wherever they come from, and all families, whatever their nationality, at the heart of the community and recognizing their needs and working together to achieve that.